My brother's last email said, "If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Run." So, I did. The email arrived at 3:42 a.m. on a Friday, and I only saw it because my phone buzzed on the nightstand while I was having one of those middle-of-the-night anxiety spirals about work deadlines and mortgage payments. I grabbed the phone expecting spam or maybe a drunk text from a friend, but instead found an email from my brother Ryan with a subject line that made my stomach drop. "Read this immediately. Auto-send if I don't check in." The body of the email was short, just 3 paragraphs that I read 7 times before my brain would accept what they said. "David, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Run. Don't go home. Don't go to work. Don't contact mom or dad. Take the USB drive I hid in your apartment. It's taped under the kitchen sink behind the cleaning supplies, and get as far away from Seattle as you can. I found something at Vertex Biotech that I shouldn't have seen. They know I copied files. They know I was going to expose them. By the time you read this, they'll already be looking for you because of our connection. I'm sorry I got you involved. The USB has everything, all the proof. Give it to someone who can use it, someone outside the system. Trust no one in law enforcement until you understand how deep this goes. I love you. I'm sorry. Run." I'd been working as a software developer in Seattle for 4 years, living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, and enjoying the kind of predictable, comfortable life that felt safe and boring in exactly the right way. Ryan was 3 years older than me, worked as a senior data analyst at Vertex Biotech, a pharmaceutical research company headquartered in downtown Seattle, with a reputation for cutting-edge work in gene therapy and experimental cancer treatments. We weren't particularly close anymore, the way adult siblings drift when their lives take different paths. But we texted every few weeks and had dinner maybe once a month at this Thai place halfway between our apartments. He'd seemed normal the last time I saw him, 2 weeks ago. Maybe a little stressed about a project deadline, but nothing that suggested he was about to uncover corporate malfeasance or send me a cryptic warning email. I tried calling him immediately, straight to voicemail. Tried texting. The messages showed as delivered but not read. I pulled up his location on Find My Friends, an app we'd both installed years ago during a hiking trip and never bothered to remove. His phone's last known location was the Vertex Biotech building, timestamp 11:47 p.m. the previous night. Nothing since then. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop and searched for news about Vertex Biotech or my brother's name. Nothing recent. I checked social media. Ryan's last Facebook post was from 3 days ago, a photo of his coffee with some caption about needing caffeine. His Instagram was similar, mundane posts about daily life with no hint of fear or danger. I told myself this was a prank, maybe Ryan's weird idea of a joke or some kind of elaborate test. But Ryan wasn't the pranking type. He was serious, methodical, the kind of person who planned everything and rarely deviated from schedules or expectations. The fact that he'd set up an auto-send email, something that would only trigger if he failed to check in at a specified time, suggested he'd been planning for this possibility, that he'd genuinely believed something might happen to him. I sat there in my dark bedroom, staring at the email, trying to decide if I was paranoid or not paranoid enough. The rational part of my brain said to call the police, file a missing person report, let authorities handle whatever was happening. But Ryan's warning had been explicit. Trust no one in law enforcement until you understand how deep this goes. That suggested corruption, people on the inside who might be protecting Vertex or actively working against anyone trying to expose them. I got out of bed and walked to my kitchen, flipping on lights and opening the cabinet under the sink. Behind the bottles of dish soap and all-purpose cleaner, I found it. A small USB drive wrapped in electrical tape and stuck to the back of the cabinet with more tape. I peeled it free, held it in my palm like it might explode, and carried it back to my laptop. The drive contained a single encrypted folder labeled vertex_evidence_do_not_open_on_networked_device. I disconnected from Wi-Fi before opening it. Inside were hundreds of files, spreadsheets, emails, internal memos, lab reports, financial documents. I started reading randomly, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It took me 20 minutes to understand the scope of what Ryan had found. Vertex Biotech had been conducting unauthorized human trials of an experimental cancer drug called Compound VX7. The drug showed promise in early animal testing, but had never been approved for human use by the FDA. Instead of going through proper channels, which would take years and millions of dollars, Vertex had been secretly administering the drug to terminal cancer patients at a network of partner hospitals, telling them it was an approved treatment covered by their insurance. The results were catastrophic. According to the internal documents Ryan had copied, VX7 caused severe organ failure in approximately 38% of patients who received it. 12 people had died directly from the treatment, not from their cancer. Vertex had covered up the deaths by falsifying medical records, bribing coroners, and threatening doctors who raised concerns. The financial documents showed that Vertex executives knew about the deaths and had calculated that the potential profit from bringing VX7 to market, estimated at $4.2 billion annually, was worth the risk of lawsuits and criminal charges if they were caught. They'd set aside $50 million for legal contingencies and family settlements as a line item in their budget. They'd literally put a price on human lives and decided it was acceptable. I felt sick reading through the files. These weren't abstract numbers or hypothetical scenarios. These were real people who died because a pharmaceutical company decided profit mattered more than safety. And my brother had discovered it, had risked everything to collect proof, and was now missing. I checked the time. 4:18 a.m. Ryan's email had told me to run, to not go home or to work. But I was home. Did that mean someone was already on their way? I grabbed my backpack and started throwing essentials into it. Laptop, charger, USB drive, wallet, a change of clothes. I was pulling on jeans and a hoodie when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Heavy footsteps, more than one person, moving with purpose. My apartment was on the 3rd floor with no fire escape. The only exit was the front door, which opened onto the hallway where I'd just heard footsteps. I stood frozen in my bedroom, barely breathing, listening. A knock on my door. Not police knock aggressive, but firm and insistent. A man's voice called out, "David Brennan, this is building security. We need to speak with you about a noise complaint." Building security at 4:20 a.m. for a noise complaint I hadn't made? I lived alone and had been silent for hours. This was them, whoever Ryan had been afraid of, already tracking me down. I moved to my bedroom window and looked out. 3 stories up, but there was a flat roof over the building's entrance about 8 feet below my window. I could drop onto it, then climb down the decorative trellis on the side of the building. Not safe, definitely not smart, but better than opening my door to whoever was pretending to be building security. The knocking got louder. "Mr. Brennan, we know you're home. Please open the door." I threw my backpack out the window first, watching it land on the flat roof with a thud. Then I climbed out, hanging from the windowsill by my fingers before letting go. I hit the roof hard, rolled to absorb impact, and immediately felt pain shoot through my left ankle. Sprained, maybe worse, but I couldn't stop to assess it. I heard shouting from above, someone realizing I'd escaped through the window. I grabbed my backpack and scrambled to the edge of the roof, found the trellis, and started climbing down. The decorative wood creaked under my weight but held. I dropped the last 6 feet to the ground, just as someone appeared at my bedroom window above. I ran. My ankle screamed with every step, but adrenaline kept me moving. I cut through the alley behind my building, emerged onto a side street, and kept running until I reached Pike Street where early morning buses were starting their routes. I jumped on the first one that came, not caring where it went, just needing distance. The bus was nearly empty, just me and a sleeping homeless man in the back. I slumped into a seat and tried to think through the panic. Someone had come to my apartment less than an hour after Ryan's email arrived. That meant they were monitoring his communications, had seen the auto-send trigger, and had immediately moved to find me. They knew who I was, where I lived, and they'd moved with terrifying efficiency. Ryan's warning had been accurate. I was in danger, real danger, from people with resources and motivation to silence anyone who knew about Vertex's crimes. I needed to get out of Seattle, needed to find somewhere safe to figure out my next move. But first, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I pulled out my phone and started researching Vertex Biotech more carefully. The company was founded 8 years ago by a man named Dr. Leonard Voss, a former Johns Hopkins researcher who'd made his fortune in early biotech investments. Vertex had gone public 3 years ago with an IPO that valued the company at $1.8 billion. Their stock price had climbed steadily since then, driven by promising research into cancer treatments and gene therapy. Dr. Voss was the public face of the company, regularly appearing at medical conferences and in media interviews where he talked about the future of personalized medicine and the moral imperative to develop treatments for terminal illnesses. He looked like exactly the kind of person who'd run a prestigious pharmaceutical research company. Mid-60s, distinguished gray hair, expensive suits, the kind of confident smile that inspired trust and investment. The idea that this man and his company were conducting unauthorized human experiments and covering up deaths seemed impossible. But the documents Ryan had collected were detailed and damning. There were email chains where executives discussed how to handle adverse patient outcomes, financial transfers to coroners who'd agreed to falsify cause-of-death reports, NDAs signed by hospital administrators who'd been paid to stay quiet. The bus reached the end of its route in the University District. I got off and walked until I found a 24-hour coffee shop where I could sit and think. My ankle was swelling, making it hard to put weight on it, but I couldn't afford to stop and deal with medical care. I ordered coffee and found a corner table where I could keep my back to the wall and watch the entrance. I needed help, someone I could trust who had the power to actually do something with the evidence Ryan had collected. A journalist, maybe, someone with the credibility and platform to expose Vertex publicly, or a lawyer, someone who could build a legal case, or maybe a federal prosecutor, someone outside Seattle's jurisdiction who wouldn't be compromised by local corruption. I pulled up my laptop and started researching investigative journalists who'd covered pharmaceutical industry scandals. I found a name that looked promising. Katherine Louu, a reporter for the Seattle Times who'd written extensively about healthcare fraud and had won awards for her investigative work. Her articles were thorough, well-sourced, and she had a reputation for protecting sources. I drafted an email to her, keeping it vague enough to avoid specifics, but clear enough to get her attention. I have evidence of criminal activity at a major Seattle pharmaceutical company. People have died. My source is missing. I need to meet in person to provide documentation. Reply if you're interested, and we'll arrange secure communication. I sent it from a burner email account I created using the coffee shop's Wi-Fi, then waited. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. David, this is Dr. Voss from Vertex Biotech. I understand you may have some concerns about your brother Ryan's recent departure from the company. I'd like to meet with you to clear up any misunderstandings. Please call me at this number. I assure you, everything can be resolved peacefully. The casual tone, the word departure instead of disappearance, the assumption that I'd just call him back like we were colleagues having a minor disagreement, it all felt calculated and threatening. Dr. Voss knew I had run. He knew I hadn't gone to police. He was offering me a way out, probably a payoff or a threat disguised as a negotiation. I deleted the text without responding. 20 minutes later, another text, this time from a different number. Your brother is fine. He's resting somewhere safe. We can reunite you if you return what he took. No one needs to get hurt. Call this number to arrange a meeting. The claim that Ryan was alive should have been reassuring, but instead, it felt like bait. If they had him, why would they release him just because I returned the files? More likely, they'd take the evidence, confirm I hadn't made copies, and then ensure both of us disappeared permanently. Katherine Louu replied to my email at 6:43 a.m. I'm interested. Use Signal to contact me at this number. Don't discuss details over email or regular text. Set up a meeting in a public place with witnesses. Don't come alone if you can avoid it. Her caution validated my paranoia and made me trust her more. I downloaded Signal, a secure messaging app with end-to-end encryption, and sent her a message. Can meet today. Need to verify you're who you say you are first. What was the subject of your article from March 2023 about Medicare fraud? She responded within minutes with the correct answer, a detail specific enough that someone impersonating her wouldn't know it unless they'd done extensive research. We arranged to meet at 2 p.m. at Pike Place Market, crowded enough to provide cover, public enough that violence would be noticed. I spent the next several hours moving between locations, never staying anywhere more than 30 minutes, constantly watching for anyone following me. My ankle was getting worse, swelling to the point where my shoe barely fit, but I couldn't risk going to an urgent care or hospital where I'd have to show ID and create a record of my location. I bought a cheap burner phone from a convenience store, paid cash, and used it to check news for any reports about Ryan or Vertex. Nothing. No missing person reports, no statements from the company, complete silence. At 1:45 p.m., I limped into Pike Place Market and positioned myself where I could watch the entrance while staying hidden in the crowd. Katherine Louu arrived exactly on time, a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor that suggested she took this seriously. She was alone as instructed. I approached her carefully, still scanning for anyone who might be surveillance or security. Katherine? I'm David. Thanks for meeting. She studied me, taking in my disheveled appearance and obvious injury. You look like you've had a rough morning. Is that evidence real? People actually died? I pulled out the USB drive. Everything's on here. Unauthorized human trials, falsified records, 12 confirmed deaths that were covered up. My brother found it while working at Vertex. He's missing now. They came to my apartment this morning looking for me. Katherine's expression darkened. I need to verify this before I can do anything with it. If what you're saying is true, this is massive. But I need to see the documentation, confirm it's legitimate, and protect both of us legally. I have a lawyer I work with on sensitive cases. Can you come to a secure location where we can review everything? I hesitated. Following a stranger to a secondary location after being hunted all morning felt like exactly the kind of mistake that gets people killed in thrillers. But Katherine seemed to sense my reluctance. I understand you're scared. How about this? We go to my newspaper's office. It's downtown, lots of people, security cameras, completely public. You'll be safe there and we can review your evidence with my editor present. If it's legitimate, we'll start working on the story immediately. If you're being set up or this is some kind of hoax, you walk away and we forget we met. That sounded reasonable. We took separate routes to the Seattle Times building, meeting in the lobby where Katherine signed me in as a visitor. The building's security was thorough, checking IDs and requiring badges, which actually made me feel safer. If Vertex wanted to silence me here, they'd have to do it in front of witnesses and cameras. Katherine led me to a conference room where her editor was waiting, a man in his 50s named Richard Koenig, who had the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades in investigative journalism. I handed over the USB drive, and they spent the next 3 hours going through Ryan's files, asking questions, verifying details against public records and previous reporting they'd done on pharmaceutical companies. Finally, Richard sat back and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts shock and grim satisfaction. This is legitimate. We can verify most of these documents against regulatory filings and hospital records. The emails are from real Vertex accounts. The financial transactions match corporate filings, and the medical data correlates with mortality rates at the hospitals mentioned. This is a Pulitzer-level story, but it's also incredibly dangerous. If Vertex is willing to kill patients and cover it up, they won't hesitate to come after you, your brother, or us. What do we do? I asked, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on me. This wasn't just about running and hiding anymore. This was about exposing crimes that were still happening, about preventing more deaths. Richard pulled out his phone. First, we need to get you somewhere safe. I have contacts in law enforcement. People I trust who aren't connected to Seattle PD or local prosecutors who might be compromised. Federal level FBI agents who specialize in corporate crime. I'm calling them now. He made the call, speaking in low tones I couldn't fully hear, then hung up and turned back to me. Special Agent Diana Foster is coming here to meet you. She's with the FBI's Seattle field office, but she works on national cases, pharmaceutical fraud, and medical device corruption. I've worked with her before. She's solid. You'll need to give her everything, full statement, all the evidence, and she'll put you in protective custody while they build the case. Special Agent Diana Foster arrived 90 minutes later with a partner, Special Agent Kevin Ruiz, both of them carrying the kind of professional authority that made me feel simultaneously safer and more aware of how serious this situation was. Foster was a black woman in her early 40s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Ruiz was younger, maybe 30, with an intensity that suggested he was good at his job. They set up in the conference room and took my statement, recording everything on official equipment with proper chain of custody procedures. I told them about Ryan's email, about the men at my apartment, about Dr. Voss's texts trying to lure me into a meeting. I gave them the USB drive and watched Foster's face as she reviewed the contents. "This is extensive," she said quietly. "Your brother did thorough work. These documents show clear criminal conspiracy, fraud, manslaughter at minimum. If we can prove the executives knew about the deaths and continued anyway, we're looking at depraved indifference murder charges. That's serious time, decades in federal prison." "What about my brother?" I asked. "They claim they have him. Are they lying? Is he dead?" Foster's expression was carefully neutral. "We don't know yet. We'll be issuing a warrant for records from Vertex Biotech immediately, and we'll be executing search warrants on their facilities and executive residences. If Ryan is being held somewhere, we'll find him. But David, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that he's already gone. Companies willing to do what Vertex has done, they don't leave witnesses." The rest of that day blurred together. The FBI took formal custody of all the evidence, photographed and cataloged every file, began the process of building a federal case. Richard and Katherine started writing their story, coordinating with the Seattle Times legal team to ensure they wouldn't be sued or face criminal charges for publishing classified corporate documents. I was moved to a safe house, a nondescript apartment in Bellevue, where 2 FBI agents would guard me 24/7 until the case was resolved. The safe house was small and sterile, furnished with the kind of generic furniture that suggested it had been used for witnesses before. I had a bedroom, bathroom, small kitchen, and living room with a TV I had no interest in watching. The agents, both young guys named Thomas Wright and James Lawson, were professional but not particularly chatty. They explained the rules. No leaving the apartment, no contact with anyone outside of approved FBI personnel and the reporters working the story, no social media, no phone calls except through monitored lines. I was effectively in prison, just a prison designed to keep threats out instead of keeping me in. That first night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, convinced that Vertex had somehow found me, that armed men were about to burst through the door. I kept replaying Ryan's email in my head, trying to find clues I'd missed, wondering if there was something I should have done differently. The next morning, Saturday, the Seattle Times published their story. The headline was direct and damning. Vertex Biotech conducted unauthorized human trials, 12 dead in covered-up scandal. Katherine and Richard's article laid out everything in meticulous detail, citing the leaked documents and interviews with former Vertex employees who'd witnessed suspicious activity but been too afraid to report it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the story was being picked up by national media. CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all running with variations of the headline. Vertex's stock price crashed, dropping 53% in the first hour of trading before being halted. The FDA announced an emergency investigation. The Department of Justice issued a statement saying they were reviewing the allegations for potential criminal prosecution. Dr. Leonard Voss appeared at a hastily organized press conference, denying all allegations and calling the story a malicious fabrication by disgruntled former employees. He looked less distinguished now, sweating under the cameras, stumbling over his carefully prepared statement. By Sunday, cracks were appearing in Vertex's denial. 3 board members resigned, issuing statements that distanced themselves from Dr. Voss and claimed they'd had no knowledge of unauthorized trials. A whistleblower from inside the company came forward with additional documents that corroborated Ryan's evidence. The FBI executed search warrants on Vertex headquarters and Dr. Voss's mansion. On Monday morning, Special Agent Foster visited the safe house with news. "We found your brother," she said, and I couldn't read her expression. "He's alive, David. He's in the hospital, but he's alive." The relief was so intense I thought I might pass out. "Where was he? What happened?" Foster sat down across from me, her voice careful. "He was being held in a private facility in the mountains, about 90 miles from Seattle. It's owned by one of Dr. Voss's shell companies, used to house problem employees who know too much. We found 3 other people there, all former Vertex workers who'd discovered information about the illegal trials. They've been held for months, some over a year, basically imprisoned and threatened into silence." "Is Ryan okay? Can I see him?" I asked, desperate for confirmation that he was really safe. He's at Harborview Medical Center under guard. He's dehydrated, malnourished, and showing signs of psychological trauma from the captivity, but doctors say he'll make a full physical recovery. You can see him once we've taken his statement and confirmed the location is secure. But David, you need to know what he went through. They held him in isolation, told him his family thought he was dead, that the evidence had been destroyed, that cooperating was his only chance at survival. He's going to need serious support to process that trauma. I did see Ryan 3 days later, escorted by Agent Foster to a private hospital room where my brother sat propped up in bed looking like a ghost of himself. He'd lost at least 20 pounds, his face was hollow and pale, and when he saw me, he started crying. I held him while he sobbed, feeling my own tears streaming down my face. "You got the email," he whispered. "You ran. You made it. You saved my life," I told him. "The auto-send warning gave me time to get out, and the evidence you collected, it's taking them down. All of them." Ryan pulled back, looking at me with hollow eyes. "How many? How many people did we save?" I told him about the story, about the FDA investigation, about Vertex's operations being shut down, about the FBI finding the other prisoners and the federal charges being filed against Dr. Voss and 6 other executives. "We can't know exactly how many lives we saved," I admitted, "but VX7 won't kill anyone else. The trial sites are closed. The cover-up is exposed. You did that, Ryan. You risked everything, and you stopped them." He nodded slowly, processing. "I thought I was going to die in that place. They told me you'd been in an accident, that you were dead because of what I'd done. I believed them for weeks until I realized they were lying about everything else, so why not that too?" The legal proceedings took months. Dr. Leonard Voss and 6 other Vertex executives were indicted on multiple federal charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, unlawful human experimentation, falsification of medical records, kidnapping, and in the cases where patients had died, voluntary manslaughter. The trial was massive, covered extensively by national media, a symbol of corporate greed and the importance of whistleblower protections. Ryan and I both testified, describing how we'd obtained the evidence and what we'd suffered as a result. The families of the 12 patients who died from VX7 gave victim impact statements that left the courtroom in tears. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for just under 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Dr. Voss received 28 years in federal prison. The other executives got sentences ranging from 12 to 22 years. Vertex Biotech declared bankruptcy and dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay settlements to victims' families. The FDA implemented new oversight procedures for pharmaceutical trials, inspired directly by the Vertex scandal. Congress held hearings on corporate accountability in the medical industry. Katherine Louu and Richard Koenig won a Pulitzer Prize for their reporting. 6 months after the verdict, Ryan and I stood outside the federal courthouse where the sentencing had taken place. We'd both been in witness protection during the trial, living in undisclosed locations with new identities, but now that convictions were secured and the primary threats were in prison, we could begin rebuilding our lives. "What do we do now?" Ryan asked, and I heard the exhaustion in his voice. He'd been through hell, psychological trauma that would take years of therapy to process, but he was alive, and he was free. "We live," I said simply. "We testified. We told the truth. 12 families got justice. We stopped a pharmaceutical company from killing more people. We did what we needed to do. Now we get to just live." Ryan nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about that email, the auto-send. I set it up thinking I'd never need it, that I was being paranoid, but it saved both of us." "It did," I agreed. "You saved us both. You found the courage to collect that evidence knowing it could cost you everything. You protected me even when you were being held prisoner. That's not something I'll ever forget." We walked away from the courthouse together, 2 brothers who'd survived something that should have destroyed us. The FBI had offered to help us relocate permanently, new names and identities if we wanted them, but we'd both decided against it. We'd hidden long enough. We'd been silent long enough. Now we could speak freely about what had happened, knowing the people who'd wanted us dead were locked away where they couldn't hurt anyone. Ryan went back to data analysis, consulting work that let him choose his clients and maintain control over his life. I returned to software development, taking a position at a nonprofit that focused on medical research transparency. We both started therapy, serious long-term work to process the trauma and learn to trust the world again. Our parents, who'd been kept in the dark for their own protection during the investigation, struggled to understand what we'd been through. The gap between their normal lives and our experience felt impossible to bridge sometimes, but we tried. Family dinners became regular again, awkward at first, but gradually more comfortable as we learned to talk about normal things instead of just the trial and the trauma. 1 year after the verdict, I received an email from one of the families we'd helped, the daughter of a patient who died from VX7, thanking me and Ryan for giving them answers about why their mother had died, for ensuring the people responsible faced consequences. She'd attached a photo of her mother, a woman in her 50s with a bright smile and eyes full of life. She believed she was getting cutting-edge cancer treatment that would save her life, the daughter wrote. Instead, she was an experiment. Your brother's courage in collecting that evidence and your courage in exposing it gave my family closure. We know now what happened and why. We know the people responsible are in prison. That matters more than you could possibly understand. I showed the email to Ryan during one of our weekly dinners. He read it quietly, tears streaming down his face. Was it worth it? He asked. Everything we went through, everything we lost? I thought about the question seriously. Ryan had lost over a year of his life, first to secret evidence gathering, then to captivity and trauma. I'd lost my sense of safety, my belief that the world was fundamentally just and fair. We'd both been marked by this experience in ways that would never fully heal. But 12 families had answers. An entire pharmaceutical company's criminal enterprise had been dismantled. Regulations had been strengthened to prevent future abuse. Journalists and whistleblowers felt empowered to expose corruption because they'd seen that it could actually lead to justice. Yeah, I said finally. It was worth it. It had to be worth it, or what was the point of any of it? Ryan nodded, wiping his eyes. I just wish I could talk to my old self, the version of me who found those first suspicious emails and thought about just deleting them and pretending I'd never seen anything. I wish I could tell him it would be okay, that doing the right thing wouldn't destroy him, that he'd survive. But you couldn't have known that, I pointed out. When you set up that auto-send email, you thought you were probably going to die. You did it anyway. That's actual courage, not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two brothers who'd survived something that should have killed us, who'd exposed evil and lived to see justice delivered. The story should have ended there, neat and resolved, but life doesn't work that way. Trauma doesn't magically disappear just because the villains go to prison. Ryan still has nightmares about his captivity. I still check over my shoulder compulsively and struggle to trust authority figures. We both carry scars that will never fully heal, but we also carry the knowledge that we did something that mattered, that when we were faced with an impossible choice between our safety and the truth, we chose the truth. That 12 families got justice because of our choices, that a corrupt pharmaceutical company was stopped before it could kill more people. My brother's last email said, "If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Run." So I did. But I didn't just run away from danger. I ran toward the truth, toward exposure, toward justice. And in the end, that made all the difference. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.